Our third speaker is Karol Przybylski. He is hardware test engineer and Scrum Master in team involved in hardware verification of 5G telecom modules. He is interested in embedded technology and applications. In spare time, he likes to watch animated series on Netflix and think how many things he could achieve if he wasn't doing that. Apart from that, he likes cooperative board games and doesn't hate pineapple pizza. Karol will deliver a presentation about Agile the hardware way. Please give warm applause for Karol.
Thanks, Natalia, for the warm introduction, and thanks to all of you who chose to come here instead of going for an early lunch break. I hope you will not regret this. So I'm going to be talking about Agile frameworks, how they can work with hardware, how they should work with hardware, and how Nokia made it work with hardware. So first of all, let's talk about our Agile reality. I think we can all agree that we live in an Agile reality. No matter where you look, everywhere is Agile. In every job offer, in every project, it has become a sort of a buzzword because it works very well for software development. It's proven to work. And on this slide, I gather some statistics to prove my point. Because Agile is so spread out that sometimes I'm afraid to open my own fridge in fear that something Agile will come out of it. So Stack Overflow developer survey, 85% of developers are using Agile in their daily work, as opposed to only 15% using traditional methodologies like waterfall. Also, Project Management International, Pulse of Profession, 71% of all technology organizations in the world are using some form of Agile, sometimes, often, something like that. And also, according to this article on the bottom, Agile projects are 28% more successful than traditional ones. So it's great. It's just pure awesomeness. However, it's become so popular that it has become a sort of golden hammer. I know it's not golden hammer, but yellow, but still, it's a nice picture. So I have a question. How many of you know, in context of psychology, what a golden hammer means? Okay, some people, great. So basically, golden hammer is a type of cognitive bias, which means that if we know only one tool, and we know it very well, we tend to use this tool for every task we are faced with. And in fact, it's a part of so-called law of the instrument, formulated by American scientist Maslow, which says that if all you know is a hammer, then everything else becomes the nail. And it's very popular in professional and everyday life. So let's say you learned how to code in Python, and you know Python very well, but you know no other languages. So you decide to code everything in Python. Backend, frontend, low-level drivers, programming microcontrollers. It's possible. MicroPython exists, right? But the fact that it's possible doesn't mean that you should do it. We didn't create all of those fantastic programming languages for fun. Every tool has its purpose. And the more tools you know, the more programming languages you know, the better code handyman you can become. So due to that, companies don't want to use waterfall anymore. This is a bit of my happy creativity. They don't want to be friends with waterfall. They want to be friends with Agile. However, moving from traditional workflow to Agile is not a trivial task. And in order to achieve it, it's best to go for some well-known out-of-the-box solution. And here comes the safe. Skate Agile. So what it is, it's basically a definition of Agile, but not only for small teams of individuals, but for the big organizations. So they can just take it and become Agile. And how does SAFE look like? It looks like this. So should I go through all of this? Yeah, thanks for enthusiasm. But I don't have enough time, so let's focus on the essentials. So this is the essential configuration for SAFE. And basically what it is, it's the well-known practices that we all know already. So developer team, product owners, Scrum masters, Scrum and Kanban practices. and two additions. The first addition is that we are all working in a train, so-called Agile release train. It's depicted right here. And what this train is, it's basically a collection of multiple Agile teams which are working for the one product. So in my situation, I was in an Agile train, which was working for design of hardware and firmware of a baseband module. So it's end-to-end product. And this Agile train usually consists of 80 to 100 people. And the second addition is that we are working in those increments shown here. So program increment is a period of time, usually 3 months or 10 to 12 iterations. And after this time, we are supposed to have a next iteration of our product. So a working hardware, something we can show to our clients. We can make a system demo out of it. And also every 3 months, we are having this planning workshop called PI planning, program increment planning. And during this workshop, we look at the previous iteration, what went right, what went wrong, and we also plan next 3 months of our work for this whole Agile release train. So just to recap, because this will be also relevant for the rest of the talk, SAFe is something we all know, so Scrum Kanban, plus working in a train, collection of Agile teams, and working in program increments, and having this planning workshops every 3 months. And I don't know if you noticed, but there is something like Agile for government. And SAFe claims it works very well, and I totally believe them, but it just sounds ridiculous to me. Like imagine you go to the municipal office to get your passport, and lady in the window tells you that she can't talk to you right now because she has sprint planning in 5 minutes. And even going further, imagine that this is not National Assembly in Poland, but this is sprint planning. And the Prime Minister is the Scrum Master, and Donald Trump is the product owner of the United States. It's a funny thought, you can play a lot with it. But this basically proves that Agile is everywhere, even in something so backwards as government administration. So we've got to ask ourselves a question: can we do it for hardware? Can we take all of this good stuff and use it for our hardware design of products? So can we do this? This is the basement module made in one of Nokia factories, the same way as we do this, some random e-commerce software store. Can we copy-paste the framework, which worked well in software, and make it work for hardware? So let's start with a short homework and check how does industry does it. Is it possible? Is someone doing it? And the first framework I found is so-called MAHD, Modified Agile for Hardware Development. And what they did is they basically took the stuff from waterfall that is needed to just exist in the hardware design and merged it with good Agile practices. And in here I outlined some of the stuff that they introduced. So first of all, they introduced so-called on-ramp phase, which is basically an initial phase of the project during which we do architecture, we do design, interfaces, and so on. This is just the needed documentation pre-work, which we just need to produce hardware. We cannot start everything at once. We have to make this documentation. Then there are also product sprints and normal sprints, because in hardware design, we are not only driven by the time, like the sprints and every iteration of time, but also by our hardware builds. And we need two kinds of sprints. One for another build of hardware on which we can work, our boilerplate, and then the normal sprints. Also, they changed the role of user stories, because user story alone is not enough to precisely describe what a hardware feature is expected, what it should do. There is some additional pre-work needs to be done, and it's also done in so-called focus metrics. So it's just mapping of user stories to very precise hardware requirements. And now some real-life examples, not only theory. There are actually products that are made using only agile methodologies. And what I found while I was preparing for this talk was that a solar roof is made by Tesla and 3M using agile. Also, wiki-speed electric cars. I have never heard about them, but something like this exists. And also what I found the most impressive is that a full jet fighter was made by Saab Gripen on some Swedish campus using Agile in only 4 months. So it is possible. However, it's not very popular because this previous framework and also these examples are very recent. Normally in hardware we use waterfall because it's more natural, and it's only recently the movement started to go from traditional towards agile. So the answer is that yes, we can do agile in hardware, and we should do it because it will give us really, really great advantages over our competition. So now that this introduction is roughly finished, it's time for a little story time on how Nokia managed to go from traditional to agile hardware design. And let's take a short break from this agile stuff, and let's think about what kinds of stories exist in the world, in the literature. So there are certain theories on how many stories they actually are in the whole literature. Some say that 30, some say that only 27, but my favorite theory is that there are 7 kinds of stories. And those are Overcoming the Monster, Rags to Riches, The Quest, Voyage and Return, Comedy, Tragedy, and Rebirth. So obviously the story of going from traditional waterfall to agile is the story of Rags to Riches. However, there's also one more theory, which is totally not made up and very real, formulated by Leo Tolstoy, that all great literature is one of 3 stories. A man goes on a journey, a stranger comes to town, and Godzilla versus Megashark. So all of those stories can be summed up in just one sentence, that a character has a problem. So if our story is rags to riches, then the problem are poverty and lack of respect. Comedy, our problem is funny. Tragedy, our problem is unsolvable, like in a Greek tragedy, when they can't solve all of their problems. So let's think about our character problems. And our character is obviously Nokia, our hero, on a journey from traditional to agile workflow. And here are some of the Nokia's problems, but those problems are not only of Nokia, but of almost every international company that is out there. So we have here time to market. This is actually very crucial because every day we spend on developing our product is another day when we can't make any money out of it. And no matter in what business line you are, we are all in the money making business. So it's very important to be there faster, and Agile promises that. Also, the rising product cost. It's especially important for hardware because every change of hardware, like midway through the project, is extremely expensive. So we need to mitigate those important factors with product cost. Also, the quality. We don't have huge problems with quality at Nokia, obviously. But it can always be better. There is this Six Sigma quality. We can always strive for more and, all of that stuff. And also changing requirements. In telecom business, they change all the time. And you really have to keep up with the client's wishes. They want one product that does one thing, but a few months later, they want this product to do everything because it's cheaper for them. So we also have to adjust for that. And last but not least, not enough fashion. It's also really important being in fashion because Nokia and many other companies are publicly traded companies. And the investors see only the headline. And if they see the headline that, hey, we are now agile company, everything is better. They are going to invest, and the stock price will go up, and everything will be great. So it's very important. And as you may already know, the answer to all of those problems is obviously going agile. We have to get to this promised land when all of our problems, well, maybe not all because the world is not perfect, but those problems would be greatly diminished. And you see that the road is curvy, not sure where it's going, but the agile is on the horizon and we have to get there. But we shouldn't do what this man is doing because it's very dangerous to run in the middle of the road. So our journey begins, and even the longest journey has its first step. And in our case, that first step was the trainings. So before our project started, we had organized 2-day trainings from SAFe. And it was really important for us hardware people because I, 2 years ago, had no idea what Agile is. I knew that something like daily stand-ups exist and Scrum Masters, but I had no idea what this means. So it was really important for us to do this kind of pre-work and learn what Agile is from the basics. So it didn't look like this, but it sure felt like this. So the whole structure of the training was provided by SAFe, and it was really good. We really learned a lot, and the feedback was positive. It's very important to do this kind of pre-work. And that's the actually photo from one training with my awesome skills in paint, in blurring out faces. Yeah, thank you. And they are practicing the confidence vote, about which I will tell some more of later. And we did also a lot of examples, and giving examples is extremely important doing training. However, I had a problem with those examples because all of them revolved around software and very specific kind of software. The e-commerce store, online shops, and not everything is an online shop. So we were hardware designers, hardware testers, and firmware developers who were learning how to divide user stories for an e-commerce store, like with features like, I want to be able to put something into my cart and then check out. And it didn't really make a lot of sense for us because what's the relation of Amazon to Nokia baseband module? So it's really important to give domain-specific examples during training because otherwise it's just a dry knowledge and it's hard to relate to that. However, what I found really helpful is that those trainings were not led by SAFe experts, but by Nokia trainers. Those Nokia trainers were led firstly by SAFe experts, and then they taught us. And it gave us a really good perspective on things, because every corporation has its own way of working, milestones, all this corporate stuff. And the SAFe does not acknowledge it. It's just a framework. So we needed this additional perspective to be able to take SAFe, mash it up with Nokia stuff, and do something that will work for us. And after the trainings, we were actually able to finally embrace the SAFe, the Agile, and start working with it. And what happened was actually quite interesting, because even though we were a large group of individuals, we actually went through the 5 stages of team development. So when a team of individuals meet together for the first time and they start working together, they go through 5 stages of team forming. Those are the stages outlined by American scientist. I believe his name was George Tuckman. So forming, storming, norming, and performing. There's also the phase of adjourning when you finish working with someone, but it's not relevant to this talk, so I'll just skip it. And during the forming phase, we all meet together for the first time. Nobody is exactly sure what we are going to be doing. Some are very timid, some are just excited, but no one is fully aware of what's going on. In storming phase, the first conflict starts to appear, and it's important for a Scrum Master and project leader to intervene if a conflict is starting to get not productive. And during this storming phase, also many teams fail, because of the conflict that was not solved. During the norming phase, after the initial challenges with some framework and the way we are working together are solved, this is ongoing adaptation. We already know some stuff, how it works, and we want to make it our own framework. And during the performing stage, when everyone already knows how it all goes, we can start working really, really well together. So we went through all of those stages, now beginning with forming. During the forming stage, we've had the first PI planning. So going back to what I already said earlier, the PI planning is this big event that is happening every 3 months. It's a big planning workshop. And during this event, we plan the work for the next 3 months. So as it says here, there is no magic in SAFe, except maybe for PI planning. And I really enjoyed those PI plannings because it's really nice to go meet everyone in a big room and actually meet person to person and plan together really well for the next 3 months. And this meeting actually has universal agenda, which was very funny for me because, you know, usually every meeting has a custom agenda, but not here. Every PI planning looks roughly the same. And it's really great because it's go-to book about planning. If you want to make a planning workshop, you can follow this roughly and you will get a good result. Awesome. So on the first day, the first block in here is for the management information, and after lunch there is a part for the team planning. And the management block looked like this. This is actually one of the PI planning that was happening in Nokia right after the SAFe was introduced. And we all met in the big room and were listening to what the management has to say to us. And it's also really valuable to, you know, has this kind of management presentations. Usually you could say that it's boring and it's not needed. But during this time, the management has to tell you why you are making this product, what it will do, and who will buy it, if they know it already. And it really helps in the future work, if you know what you are working toward. And also we can ask questions, because, you know, usually you don't meet with the management face to face. You can't ask them, you know, some not comfortable questions. And in here, it's your time to do that. And it really works well, provided the management has good attitude, but they usually have. And then, after lunch, there are so-called team breakouts. So you all meet in a big room together with all the teams working in this Agile release train, and you do your planning together. Every team gets their own whiteboard, table, colorful cards on which you can plan, and so on. And actually here, it's me in this Renaissance pose. I haven't even changed my shirt since then, as I can see. And also here for the blurring of the faces, I used GIMP. GIMP is better than Paint, I recommend. So, and it's really important to meet all of the teams in one big room because it gives you visibility. And if you are doing your planning and you are depending on some other team, you don't have to write emails, organize teleconference or something like this. You can just walk up to them, talk with them, and sort every dependency on the fly. However, you also have to have well-ventilated room, because imagine if the air conditioning was malfunctioning in a room with 80 people. But it's really valuable to meet everyone and to be there in person and to plan everything with cards, colorful, you know, creative, and so on. Then, on the second day, there is additional planning session. Then we have program risks and all of that other stuff. And the other very interesting thing is the confidence vote. Now, confidence vote looks like this. This is from the SAFe webpage. So sorry for the resolution, there was no other photo. And during the confidence vote, it's your time to speak up. And I think that's the most revolutionary thing of all of those that SAFe wants to introduce. So what happens is that at the end of the planning, when the whole plan is laid out, every single team, every single dependency, the management asks you, how confident are you with this plan? And you have to raise your hand and show from 1 to 5 fingers. 1 means that this will fail, this is impossible. 5 means that you are completely sure that your plan is great and it will work. And this is your chance to speak up. This is the only chance when you can stand up, say, I don't like it. This doesn't make sense, and everyone has to listen to you and has to answer you, the top managers and so on. And actually, such situation happened on our first PA planning, where one PCB designer showed one finger, and he was asked, why did you vote in such a way? And he said that my 20 years of experience tells me that it's impossible to make a PCB layout for this product in such a short time. Then there was 20 seconds of silence. No, what to do with this? But finally, he started speaking with management, talking like what are the mitigations and so on and so on. And finally, he was, convinced. He showed like 3 fingers, and we could go on. Because if no, yes, you are laughing, but he was able to speak up because then he was convinced, and I don't know if he was convinced because, manager said you have to be convinced, but if this plan would have failed later, it didn't, but if it would have failed, he could just stand up and said, I told you so. You didn't listen to me, but everyone heard it. And he was wrong because at the end we delivered. But, it's a good opportunity to speak up. It's really important. So then after the first PA planning, we went to the next phase of team building, which was storming. So during this phase, we started having some conflicts with the way that the SAFe describes, because it didn't really match our hardware designer expectation. So first, we've had some problems. I've had some problems with the meetings, because as you know, Agile introduces some new types of meetings, like sprint planning, sprint review, sprint retrospective, daily meetings. And that there's a lot of this stuff, and we were given complete freedom in how they should look like. And I had a big problem with this, because too much freedom is sometimes too much. Because I've had so many ways to organize those meetings, to lead them, that I didn't know what to choose. I don't know, should the daily presence be mandatory? How we should lay our tickets in Jira? What tools should I use for the meetings? There was a lot of this stuff. So I was asking the framework, how should I do it? And the framework would respond, you have complete freedom, do it however you like. But I didn't know what would I like to do. And this is actually a very popular problem in everyday life, like when you have too much freedom in choosing your wine. And it's very well described as fear of missing out. Because when you are faced with a lot of choice, then you started thinking, if I go this way, then maybe that other way was better. Maybe I should have taken the other one. Like you are making plans for the weekend and you are pushing into the last minute because you don't know what to choose. And I had the exact same problem. And the best solution for it is that don't think about the alternative version of reality that you might have participated in. The best way is just to choose whatever, and then based on the feedback of your team, of other people, just adapt it to the way so that, it would work well for you. And then another issue that we've had, perhaps the most serious one, was the dividing tasks. So Agile says very strictly that every single person of the team should be able to do every single thing in the backlog, every single task. And for us, it was completely not possible because we have very specialized teams in hardware testing and also PCB layout. We have some people that do only one thing and others that do the other thing. And also many of our tasks last more than one iteration, one sprint. And that, by SAFe rules, is not permitted. Because our scope, in my team at least, looks like this. So it's Ethernet, synchronous Ethernet, SRAO, almost obsolete but still existing, I2C, PCIe, stress test, USART, clock and sync SPI. And you could write a whole book about only Ethernet testing. So usually we would have one person who does Ethernet, other one who does SRIO. It was very specialized. So, also the bus factor in our project was pretty low. And it was an issue for us, and you can't really overcome it. There are some people out there, especially in hardware development, that are very specialized. So each time when we had planning or something like this, everyone would be waiting for their turn. So I'm the guy that does Ethernet, so I don't care about anyone else. I'm just waiting for my Ethernet tasks. And you have to really think about how to increase this participation in the meeting, how to increase this buzz factor so that there is more knowledge redundancy. So it's bad because the safe doesn't permit it, but it's good because it makes you think on how you could do some things better. So after these initial problems, we went on to the norming phase, when we could, the rainbow is coming from the mountain. Everything started to look better. We would adapt those changes that we needed to. And that was also visible during the next PA plannings. And on the second PA planning, we actually inserted some changes into the SAFe framework, because we were always doing planning in the way that we write the tasks on the colorful card, put it on the whiteboard, it all looks nice. However, on the second PA planning, on the first day, we put all the cards on the whiteboard, and when we came back the second day, all of those cards have fallen down, like on this picture. So our planning was ruined because we only had them on the whiteboard. So from this day on, we decided that we will use only Excel for the planning. And Excel is fun. It's great for, editing the same document by many people at the same time. But I like the cards because it's sometimes good to just close your computer to write something on the paper. It's more creative and so on, but using Excel is actually more pragmatic. And that's one of the changes that we had to do. Also, the remote teams. Now that's a big problem because SAFe strictly says that there is no possibility for a team to be remote which is working in while Agile release train. But it's completely unrealistic because in modern times, in almost every company, there exists something like remote work. So you can't go physically to every PA planning, to every meetup, because it generates so much cost that it's simply not feasible economically, either for small companies and for big companies. So we have those great teleconference systems and so on, but nothing will ever outperform the value of the physical human contact. If I can just walk up to someone, ask them questions instead of writing mails and so on. So this is something you just have to accept. The remote work exists and you have to follow it. However, all of those problems and the solutions we had for them, which turned out pretty good, were not the biggest obstacle that we had. And this obstacle is actually that culture eats strategy for breakfast. The first time when I saw this quote on the training that we've had before the project, I actually laughed because it didn't make sense to me. What does it mean? Because the strategy is everything. If you have a good strategy, you just follow it, like a good algorithm. There's nothing that can stop you. But actually the culture is more important because without this culture, you can't execute this strategy according to the rules that you want to follow. The culture is a boilerplate. And culture is something that is not changing overnight. You have to give it time, you have to invest in it. And how much time do you need to invest to change the culture? Well, if you think about culture as a collection of many habits that you need to change, then on average, according to some data, building new habit lasts 66 days. There are also some popular beliefs that are completely fake, that building new habit lasts 21 days, but it's completely not true. And in this particular science paper, it was said that building a new habit lasts from anywhere from 18 to even 254 days. So if you think that a culture is building many habits at the same time, it will last a long time. And you just have to sacrifice this time to change your culture from the traditional one, more natural, towards this agile one, which will bring you more money and be better. And finally, after a few months of working in this agile mode, the feedback session was organized. And that's the crucial point of this presentation, because that was the time when these very experienced and well-known in the subject PCB designers, electrical designers, and testers had the chance to speak up and say what they didn't like and what they did like. And here is the bad. So as I mentioned earlier, highly specialized work. In PCB layout teams, they have someone who deals specifically with crosstalk and the other issues like this. So he can't take any other task from the backlog. Also, there are tasks that are non-divisible because they have to last multiple iterations. Also, some people, and that's because of the culture change, didn't like planning overhead. And what I mean by that is there were suggestions that daily meetings shouldn't be daily, but it should occur every 2 days. So daily meeting every 2 days. And the reason for that is because those people didn't change their culture. They needed time to adapt this new habit. Because daily meeting works in almost every single business that exists, but they needed time to adapt for it. Not possible to design and test. It wasn't possible for PCB layout guys to, design small part of the PCB, manufacture it, and then test in one iteration. It doesn't really make sense. And it's against the general safe principles. So you have to violate that in order for it to make it work for the hardware. And also incompatible layers. So it's hard to be agile on one layer if the silicon development is not agile. You can't develop silicon and processors in the agile way. However, there was more good than the bad, and what everyone liked were the soft parts of agile. So increased communication and visibility. If you come to PI planning, you can look at what the other people are doing, because you may be in your tiny shell in the hardware testing, but you can actually see how the process of making PCB layout looks like and what the other guys are doing. Also participation, because you can speak up during confidence vote. You can ask more questions to the management. Everyone really loved that. Also setting the short-term goals. Usually in waterfalls, you set goals that will last for a year or year and a half. And it's a long time. And setting short-term goals is just better for your mind and for your way of working. Also the system demos, that you actually are supposed to create something that you can show to all your clients, even though those clients are external. And effort estimation, because it's really hard to overload someone with work if you count the story points and all that stuff really precisely. So everyone pretty much really liked it. And at the end, we moved on to the performing stage, when we finally managed to eat up all those problems that the framework was giving us. We merged it with our traditional way of working, and it was working pretty well. So even though something like Agile Silicon doesn't exist yet, maybe something in the future, maybe in the FPGAs, it generally was a positive change. And on this slide, I outlined the most important, very trivial, but even though they are trivial, they are very important for every transformation that you are making. So you have to provide domain-relevant examples. When you are teaching someone how to code in Python, you don't give them examples from C++. It's related, but it's not the same. You have to give time for your culture change, because it doesn't happen overnight. You have to lead by example. You have to show that you believe in certain things in order for others to be able to follow you. And you have to invest in this change if you want to make it happen. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Karol. Do we have any questions from the audience? Please come closer, and Karolina will give you a microphone.
Hi, I'm Patrick. Do you actually have some performance comparison of pattern you used before in Agile? I'm interested in performance, not developer's opinion.
In the words of Mark Zuckerberg, my team will get back to you with that. No, I don't have it on hand, like the crude data. But from what I noticed and what I've heard, the performance is better than it was before. Like,
And
I mean, with the speed of applying changes.
Yes, exactly.
From what I know, it's faster than before.
Time to market, pretty specifically. Okay, and how long are you using Agile for hardware?
Year and a half.
Would you say that you finished the switch, the shift from previous framework to Agile, or you still working on it?
I think one project driven in Agile mode is too little to say that you fully finished it. Like I said, you need to give it more time.
Okay.
Actually.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi. So, could you tell us what techniques did you use to overcome the problems with dividing the tasks and the problem that the team members didn't want to share on working on tasks that are outside of their specialty, let's say?
This is actually a very complicated question. So the fact that we can't divide certain tasks, we just accepted it. Some things needs to last certain time, and our Jira looked a bit worse than it should, but we just dealt with it. Maybe there is a better solution, but
Well,
just how we did it. And for the second part of your question, how to increase the participation, well, every problem we are faced with, I try to do it everyone's problem. Because the internet is failing, the SPI guy also can't do his tests. You know, it's problem specific, I'd say.
But did it result in, for example, the Ethernet guy working with person from another specialty and helping that other person, or how did it look? I just wonder, because I have a similar problem in my own team.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, like I said, it's complicated, but generally, someone who knows how to code Ethernet, how to test it, usually is very experienced. So you have to ask him for help. Hey, look at this guy, he needs some help. This is your problem too. This is our problem, because we are not an individual in a room, we are a team. I know it sounds very, you know, general, but it's very problem specific, and it's very hard to solve. I admit it.
Right, okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Do we have more questions? Okay, one more.
Hi, I want to ask, how do you solve a problem with estimation of complexity of some task, very specific tasks, which is, you know, in the field of some only one job position? So how do you solve the problem with estimation by whole team?
This is also a big problem, because if you have highly specialized work, you usually rely on the experience of one person, because that person knows best, and some other people don't know how much time it takes to write an Ethernet test. And the problem with estimation is usually solved by doing it wrong several times and then adjusting to it. Like, you know, the Agile way. You do it wrong first 3 times, and for the fourth time, it works well.
Okay, so no tips for doing that, or just testing and look what are the results?
Yeah, I think trial and error works best. We tried like planning poker and so on, but it didn't work very well.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I can see there are no more questions. So I think we can stop. You can try to find Karol later. Now we'll have 1 hour, 1 hour and 60 minutes break for the lunch. We'll meet again at 2 p.m. and we'll have 2 more presentations about Agile. So if you are interested, please be here after lunch. Please give a big applause for Karol for his presentation.